Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Pat Flynn Show here on the podcast or on YouTube. If you're watching in, we've got the videos back up, so that's a nice new feature to the Pat Flynn Show.
Yeah.
We're here with Dan John again. Dan, how has your training this past week been? You had a slight injury last week. How is that going, by the way?
It's you'll, for the viewers, they'll see that I have a brace on it, not correctly, but I do have a brace on. Let me put that on correctly. Yeah, it's the strangest thing. You combine a little bit of middle-age pull-up syndrome with falling on a sidewalk, and it doesn't heal like it should and like it used to when I was 8. But it's all good. It's I've eased up. Eased up on anything like dips or presses.
Right.
And but the nice thing is, because of that, I'm forcing myself to do lots of extra squatting, lots of other stuff. So, I've always thought, Pat, that and this is probably against what many people in the industry think, but I've always thought injuries is a bit of a gift. Well, Stu's book is called The Gift of Injury. And because what it does is it stops you in your tracks and makes you go, okay, I can't do this now. Well, and then usually you do all the things you should be doing.
Yeah, especially if you get injured in a way that it hinders what you're already good at. And we know we always fall into that trap. We always love to do the things we're already good at. We like to avoid the things that we know we should be improving. Yeah. I had a moment this morning myself, Dan. I came down the steps. I didn't have my glasses on. And I missed the last 2 steps. Boom, right on my tailbone and elbow. So I think I'm okay. A little sore, but
falls, man. I say this a million times. The most dangerous thing in my house is my floor.
Yeah.
I think I told the story when I was first rehabbing the total hip. Someone rang the God blessed doorbell. After that, I had a sign that said, "Don't ring the doorbell." And my dog lost his mind. I went down to open it, and my dog cut my right leg underneath me, and I landed on the banister, and I thought I broke every rib on my right side. Fortunately, I think I punctured my spleen. No, I don't know. I was fine. But boy, did that hurt. Yeah. You got to be careful around that. Stairwells are dangerous.
And it's one of those things like, hey, I'm relatively young. I can take it. My Taekwondo training kicked right in, so I did a nice break fall. But hey, even if you know how to fall, if you have enough distance, it's still gonna hurt.
Still gotta fall. Yeah.
But I'm like, dang, man, like if I was like old and decrepit, that might have been the end of me right there, like that could have been it for Pat Flynn.
Well, statistically at my age, you want to choose cancer over falling.
Right. But let's go back to, if you don't mind, Dan, let's go back to the point you brought up. I think that's worth spending a little time on, of how injuries can be a gift. And this ties into something we've talked about fairly recently, where how the idea of restrictions can really help you to become more productive and creative. Now, some
restrictions, right.
Right. So sometimes these restrictions can be voluntary. I give the example of my old guitar instructor used to try and discipline me to not play so fast and to play more melodically by taking away fingers that I was allowed to use. So he would say, okay, like you're good at the fast stuff. Now we need to learn to play more melodically. So you're only going to play with your pointer finger or even your pinky finger. So he would impose these restrictions to force me to work on weaknesses. And sometimes it's nice if that's voluntary. I could bring those fingers back in whenever I want. But there's actually many musicians and guitarists who've like had their fingers cut off, right? So it's an involuntary restriction. Django Reinhardt, if I'm remembering the name rightly, a pretty famous jazz musician, had some injury to his hands, but it forced him to be creative and develop a unique style and a unique way of playing that ultimately led to him becoming a very famous musician. So maybe we could tie this insight into training somehow, because sometimes these restrictions are not voluntary. We just get hurt, and then we have to live with it. We have to do something with that. Mm-hmm.
Well, right now, I would say the bulk of our listeners are in restriction. If there is a blessing from the COVID, and I can't help myself. I always, I'm a one-eyed optimist. A lot of people, I've been getting these emails. All I've got is this, but I'd like to do this program. Well, you can't. Well, what should I do? Well, use that space between the ears to figure this out. You want to do a training program at home, since March 16th, and all you got at home is a couple old rusty dumbbells and a PVC pipe. Well, hey, I can make that work. I'm not because I'm smarter, because just I would accept the fact that this is what I can do. When I coached at Judge and we didn't have a ring, we didn't have an area to throw the discus in. It's funny because the head coach built a ring. And I told him years later, I said, now you're hurting me actually as a coach, because now I can't constantly remind the athletes how deprived they are. That kind of I thought it was a valuable thing as a coach to be able to say, those other guys, they got things like rings and fields. All we got is wall. But, in that time we had, that great Paul Northway, the national champion discus thrower, all those state champions, because we had to work around that. And by working around it, I found later when I went to another place and had nothing but great facilities, the first thing I looked for was a wall, because what we did with the wall was better than having the best and brightest. We talked about this with collegiate football programs, where there's an intern that goes around to make sure that the logo on every single plate is facing the right direction. That's what the person's college experience is going to be. Because that's helpful for life. But if you hurt, like when I broke this wrist back in 2001 or 2, whatever it was, because I couldn't do anything with my left side, I had to do something. And so I started doing loaded carries, man. And I hate to say the rest is history, but for my career, the rest is history. Because once I started doing the loaded carries, you could say I hate to say if I'm famous, but loaded carries, goblet squats, some programming, some ideas, but the loaded carries is the thing that really opened the door for me to kind of get on the radar of most people. And it's because I got hurt. I'd have never done them. Patrick, I wouldn't have done farmer walks.
Right.
I wouldn't have done bear hug carries, but I had to, because that's all I could do. If you look at the cover of Never Let Go, you'll see that my left hand is still in a cast, and because I couldn't do anything else. That picture was taken before the book came out. We thought it was such a great picture.
No, that's great. First off, you definitely are famous for loaded carries. That is a fair thing to say. That's one of the things that I first read of yours, that I remember back in the old days when I'm sitting at the computer lab and, high school and college, reading Dan John articles on loaded carries. Those were the days. Yeah. So that is totally fair. And that's really cool, because it actually ties into one of the principles that you talk about. So I talk about restriction in my little green book, but you talk about how deprivation builds capacity. And I think there's and I think there's a link there. I know you often talk about it in relation to fasting, but I think deprivation in another sense can build creative capacity.
But see, Patrick, I think it's creative capacity. I think so there's work capacity, which is the farmer walk, but the creative, or the bear hug carry, dragging the sled, is creative capacity.
Right.
Now, because of me using my brain, my work capacity went through the roof. But I think as humans, we constantly have to remind ourselves that we made this choice a long time ago, that we would use our brains instead of our claws. T.H. White, The Sword and the Stone, does a beautiful job with this in the story of the badger, where all the embryos come before God, and they all get to pick their own tools. And finally, the last one is human. He goes, we just feel God, like you just made us just fine. And if we need to fly, we'll put things together to make us fly. If we need to go on water, we'll put things together. And God says, you guessed my riddle. And
you done good. Yeah.
And at the end, he says, bless you. And I guess what's funny is that, isn't that interesting how I pull all this crap together in a second? But so when you think about, we made a choice to use our brains more. We did. We did. And so I think when you find yourself in the middle of quarantine, and it looks like many of our brother and sister states will be going back to serious quarantines, because that little experiment of kumbaya didn't work out as well, like the scientists told us. A lot of people are listening right now are going to be sitting there going, I got to go through another period of just training at home again. Right. You do. But you're going to come out on the other side if you look at it as this is going to increase my capacity. This is going to make me better. You're going to be better. If you think, woe is me, all I've got is 2 Olympic bars, 26 kettlebells, a huge pull-up station, 4 TRX, 2 rip trainers, 2 different kinds of hip thrusts, every kind of loaded carry device in the world, every Scottish Highland Games thing, every track and field implement. Woe is me, because that's my gym. Okay.
Right.
Woe to me. If I start thinking like that, I got to retire tonight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and but instead I got to think like when I moved to California, I had my 28 kilo kettlebell. That's all I had, and I formed the Coyote Point Kettlebell Club. And within a few months, I was wondering to myself why I ever had a whole home gym.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I think it's always. I think there's some advantages to being. What do you call yourself, the one-eyed optimist? I like that, right? And it's the idea that
South Pacific, yeah.
Yeah, that that there's opportunity in the struggle, right? There's always opportunity in the struggle, and sometimes we have to take a step back and we have to try and search for that opportunity. We have to look for it. And just a little thing for me is, I've always sort of protested working out at home. I'm at home most of the day. I'm writing at home. I'm podcasting at home. So I like to get out of the house to work out. I like to go to the gym. However, when the wife and I would go to the gym, we'd put the kids in the childcare there and this or that. And that's fine. They liked that. And that was nice. And we got to spend some time together, just the wife and I. But now since I've been home, I've really been working out with my kids, like actively working out with my kids. And it's been an absolute joy. I mean, my son, Rowan, and my daughter, Mira, the other two are a little too young still,
Sure.
But Mira came out in her Captain America suit the other day, started doing the kettlebell deadlifts. I think actually, I put it on Facebook and Dan, you made the nice remark that she's already stronger than Dad, which is probably true in some respects, right? She's certainly more nimble than Dad. But, this has been really great because this is one of those things that may not have happened otherwise, or it wouldn't have happened as soon, right? Not because I didn't want it to, just because it just wasn't even on the radar necessarily. Right. And, I do walks with the kids. So, there was physical activity, but now we're really lifting weights together. And I'm really teaching them about a lot of the principles and stuff that we talk about. And I was just kind of reflecting on that the other day and saying, this is one of those blessings that Dan John talks about, all the other bad, and we don't have to say that the bad stuff isn't bad to acknowledge the good stuff. I think that's a stupid thing that people fall into. They say, oh, you found a good thing. Does that mean that you support all the horrors away? No, don't be a child. Don't be a child. We're saying this, regardless of all the bad stuff, and there's been a lot of bad stuff, this is a good thing, and we should count it as a good thing. So I'm glad you brought that up because that was just something that I was reflecting on the other day, and it's really kind of changed my mindset about working out at home, where now it was just kind of this chore that I would check off just to be responsible. Now I'm really starting to look forward to it and thinking, well, maybe I won't go back to the gym, right? Bad news for that gym, but yeah, here we are. Mm-hmm.
You make well. If I just follow up, I used to have what was considered one of the finest weightlifting facilities in the world when I was at Juan Diego. A couple magazines did articles on it. We had a whole bunch of press coverage. We had coaches from around the country come and stay with me and just to see what we're doing. And then people say, well, when do you work out? And I would say, when I go home. Wait, what? You have all this stuff here. Right. But the head coach can't train in his own facility because the second I lay down to do something or pick up a kettlebell or pick up a barbell, somebody's going to walk over and say, where is the collar for the monkey wrench bar? So here I was with the facility of my dreams. I couldn't work out in it. Mm-hmm. So I would come home to my garage and have these delightfully happy workouts. The word workout, folks, when you're under a lot of stress, you go to the gym to work out the stress. You don't go to a gym to work out your body. You work out the stress. And then just a quick little follow-up on something you said. So my daughter Lindsay wrote the about the author for my new book. And one of the points she makes, and it's just a small page and a half thing, is that I tell people all the time that you're the sum of your habits. And I tell people all the time, well, you know, life's about choices. And she always thought that I was judging choices as good or bad, good or evil, right or wrong. And she only recently figured out that all I was saying was, it's about your choices. I wasn't judging your choices. I'm just saying, if you choose to smoke at age 14 in high school because you think that's going to look cool, you might, well, it might, and so many might, you're probably not going to make it to your 50-year high school reunion. But it's fine. I'm not saying it was good or bad to smoke.
I'll say saying, I'll, if you won't say it, I'll say it. It is bad. It's bad.
Oh, it's terrible. It's not a crazy idea. But here's the thing: I'm not your mom. I can't run around and swipe. You know, I certainly can swipe it out of your face once. If you decide to get married at 18 and go work at the, you know, the local mill, you know, 40 hours a week and have 4 kids by the time you're 25, that's great. In fact, it's inspiring. But then you can't tell me at the 20-year reunion you could have, would have, should have been a junior college baseball player because you made the choice. And by the way, if you decided to become a junior college baseball player, you gave up something else too. We're always choosing. But, you know, I always go back to what Schopenhauer says.
Yeah, no, hold on. There's a nice, I want to draw something out there that is good, because I think on one level, I think there's 2 things there that I'm picking up. One is that, look, friends, I don't care how much you think are, you know, relative, you know, morals and things are. I reject all that. Some choices are just bad, straight up bad, right? There is that, and I'm happy to say that. But there's other choices where you just have to weigh the alternatives, and it could be either one of those could be fine, right? I could be a doctor, or I could be a lawyer. I could go to school, or I could get a job. And neither of those are inherently wrong on their face, right? It's not, you're not have a moral obligation to be a doctor over a lawyer or something like that. Even though I would say you have a moral obligation to at least take care of your body. And if you know that smoking is bad, you should do that. But there's other choices that you're talking about, Dan, where, there's no like upfront moral strong judgment there. But downstream, it's about your choices. So it's that second thing that I think you're kind of maybe trying to emphasize a little bit, right?
Well, and again, I mean, what did I used to say? When you teach high school theology, one of the things you get used to is that high school kids, they love to raise their hand and do the what if and the stuff like that. And so I finally came up with the phrase, "It's always wrong to kick a baby in the head with a boot." And then I would say, and folks, I'm thinking about an army boot, not a cowboy boot, because I don't want to make that decision. You know, let's just focus on combat boots, okay?
Right.
And it's funny because no matter what, you always get a hand. So if you say murder is wrong, okay, someone's life, right? Yeah. Whoa, you're the first person in history to think of that one. You know, killing is wrong. What if it's war? Well, there's been about 5,000 years of conversations about that one too.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm glad you're here. So, and again, the important thing is, gentle listener. Yeah, obviously, I think things are right and wrong, obviously, but the idea is, very often I'm never there when the choice is made. I'm only there when someone wants me to repair it. So you decide to spend 40 years eating mac and cheese 2 times a day, McDonald's for lunch, and since you get free Coca-Cola at work, you drink up to a gallon a day. You come to me 40 years later after this, and let's just say you have a little issue. And I'm not going to tell you what it is, gentle listener, but it might be.
We can take some educated guesses.
Yeah, I can't undo the 40 years of choices. But what I can do is now so whether your choices, I can't say your choices were good or bad. It's not my job. My job now is to, okay, let's look at those choices. Let's look at the decision matrix you're going to do. Let's see if we can undo some of the damage. And frankly, the more I read, the more I realize we can't.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of it is kind of, you know, or at least as much, and this is kind of the sad news to kind of reckon with, is that if we can, then it's going to be maybe to a certain degree, but not all of it. Not all of it.
I just reread that there was this terrible. It is probably the most offensive show in the history of television, and that's a high bar for me. But it's called The Biggest Loser. What an offensive title first.
I never,
and I know many.
I never watched it. I try to avoid any reality television as far as possible.
Well, and it was just the worst kind of personal training, the worst kind of nutritional advice. They did a long-term study on the participants, and they found out that up to 6 years later, the hormone leptin had only gotten back to 60% of normal. They had destroyed their ability to deal with hunger and satiation 6 years after that show.
So, Dan, give me the quick rundown, because I honestly have never seen a single episode. But I imagine, what was it? Just extreme boot camp, yell and scream in your face, drive them to the ground physically, don't feed them anything type of approach.
Yeah. And then everybody who was in the show, the trainers and stuff, were, you know what I just said about, I don't judge people.
Here's a judgment. Bad, wrong.
I would love it if my daughters were here right now, but these were the most judgmental trainers, judgmental judges I've ever seen in my life. My mother-in-law keeps the television on all the time, and her and Ron, who died, gosh, Ron must have died 4 years ago now, and Ron loved that show, and so I would watch it a few times, and I was always so uncomfortable with, and one of them's name is Jillian. I know that. She's got that terrible kettlebell swing video. That's how I know her mostly. And she was so cruel to the participants. And I thought to myself, I don't see how this pushes the kingdom forward. I don't. And here's the interesting thing.
I don't know if they were so concerned about that, though, Dan. Yeah. They're trying to push their ratings forward.
If they would have done liposurgery and gastric bypass, two major surgeries, those two very invasive major surgeries, their hormone levels would have remained normal after those surgeries. So if you do gastric bypass, your hormones don't freak out at all. If you do lipo, your hormones don't freak out. But if you do excessive starvation and excessive work, your hormones freak out, so that 6 years later, they're still messed up. And I look at that, it's like, the body is literally screaming at the show, this is wrong. This is not an appropriate way to shave off pounds. Yeah, and I'm sorry about the noise.
No, that's okay. It actually sounds okay on my end, but
gentle listener, right in front of my house right now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 trucks removing about, well, for $600 worth of crushed red rock out of my sidewalk. So
beautiful.
But it's all good. Hey, it could be worse. This could only be going on for the last 3 months.
I was gonna say, like, I want to see your street at the end of all this, Dan, because it's got to look like the Taj Mahal out there or something, right?
They've had 1 or 2 small problems. Yeah. So, but gentle listener, I'm doing fine. It's not stressful at all.
Well, all right. So let's go back. You're right though, because they essentially just traumatized. It sounds like they didn't make them help. They just traumatized these participants. And look, any goon, any idiot can take somebody and beat them to a pulp and starve them and have them lose weight. That's not intense. It doesn't take any talent whatsoever.
But we know this. I mean, we know that, for example, so if I woke up fat, that little PDF that we are sharing with our listeners.
Yep.
Now, I think I would like, if I was to be on the show, I would like them to put their arms around intermittent fasting, just so they can get a handle, just so that these people on the show can get a handle on the difference between starving and hunger, because you have to understand hunger. So I would do the intermittent fasting. Mm-hmm. I would do the morning training session, but I would focus on strength at some level to build up lean body mass. Mm-hmm. And then right after that, I tell you one thing, in my perfect Biggest Loser idea, we would be at this nice little place, and everyone would fast in the morning. We'd wake up, we'd drink way too much coffee. We'd do our little strength workout, where the bulk of the strength workout for the first couple of weeks is me teaching proper human movement, which, by the way, gentle listener, is exhausting. Learning how to move correctly with load is so much harder than 3 sets of 10 on a machine.
Yeah.
And then maybe we go for the place we're going to have breakfast is 1 mile there. We eat breakfast. We walk 1 mile on a beach. We walk on a beach 1 mile. We walk back on a beach 1 mile. Maybe there's a nice little hill back up to our place. And then in the morning, and then I would probably bring in some people to talk about other forms of entertainment in life. Maybe everybody have to learn how to play the guitar. Pat Flynn would teach them. Maybe we'd have they'd have to go journal and write poetry. And then we'd have another workout session a couple hours later, and then walk down that beach to food and walk back. The idea is just those gentle rhythms that we know work. I would never raise my voice, because the last thing a person who's dealing with obesity needs is one more person judging them.
So that's the that's if Dan John were coaching The Biggest Loser. I think we got an episode title on this. I like this a lot. And yeah, the whole judgment thing. This is one of those things that kind of gets me a little bit. First off, the human mind judges, right? This is the second act of the mind. We apprehend concepts, we make judgments. You know, men are mortal. So you can't avoid making judgments. It's going to happen. You can only avoid making the right judgments. That's the only thing you can do, is avoid making the right judgments. So understanding when you should announce your judgments, for example, or how to gain enough conceptual clarity so you're making the right judgments of whether it pertains to morals or not. So it's just one of those things where it's funny, because you're kind of saying is that there's that one of the judgments we make are about the poor judgments other people make. So like, again, you can never escape making judgments. So people should stop saying don't make judgment. You can't do it. It's an inclination of the mind that can't be avoided. You can only avoid making the right judgments, and you should focus on that. Just making the right judgments. And so what Dan is saying here is, if I were coaching The Biggest Loser, here's the judgments that I would make to ensure that these people make the best progress possible, maintain their inherent sense of dignity and self-worth in virtue of being human people, which is that is a proper judgment, right? That people have this inherent dignity, and that to try and tarnish this dignity of somebody is probably one of the bad judgments that these coaches were making. And then make sure we set them up with long-term sustainable habits, that they're challenged but successful. Introduce them to, some type of intermittent fasting. And another piece of kind of recent research that came out, I'll link the study below, is showing now that having possibly 2 consecutive days of a moderate caloric boost in your diet is helpful for maintaining that hormone profile again. And this is kind of traditional knowledge, right? Like most figure competitors, bodybuilders have always known, like, we need something like a cheat day, like something like it. And now there's another new piece of research. I'll link it. I think Lane Norton was one of the researchers, and they found that actually having 2 consecutive days of a caloric boost tends to really help keep things happy and healthy, right? When you're dieting. So something that's another possible judgment worth considering. Again, it's new. We need more research to substantiate it, but it seems like it might be worth paying attention to. Mm-hmm.
Our experience has been that does work, Patrick.
Right.
So this is once again where science is catching up to experience.
Right.
And by the way, that's always okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's always okay. Can I add one small little thing?
Please do.
So another thing Lindsay wrote in this thing, and that I didn't realize she didn't understand this, but then when we talked last night, the first time I said to a thrower, "You're not good enough to be frustrated," Lindsay said that she thought, and it's okay for me to swear, right? It's only it's this word in sign language. Okay, is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
She said, "Dad, you're an asshole." And I went, "What? What do you mean by that?" She goes, "Well, this kid is bothered." And I go, "About what?" He goes, "Well, he's throwing badly, and you said you're not good enough to be frustrated." I said, "Well, he's throwing, 85 feet. He's terrible. He's been doing it 5 days, and he's frustrated." And she told me it took her probably into her first part of college to understand what I meant. So Lindsay's going to go on now to, basically she's going to become a state shot put champion. She's going to throw by herself a whole bunch of times. We're going to have people help her. There's going to be a lot of pressure. If she doesn't throw her lifetime best on her last throw at the state track meet, she doesn't win the state championship and goes home with a silver medal 2 years in a row. But on her last throw, she sets a personal record, destroys the competition, and it's one of the most amazing moments of my athletic career, because to watch it happen. And we talked last night about how if she would have thrown poorly on that throw, I wouldn't have said to her, "You're not good enough to be frustrated." I'd have thrown my arms around her and said, "I don't have, it's truth as your coach, I don't have any words. There's nothing to say, because for the rest of your life, that woulda, coulda, shoulda is going to sit there. But when you overcome it." So for me, some people say, "Well, I tried to learn how to golf and I went out twice and I hated it. I just got so frustrated." Twice. Pat, I could have been a great guitar player, but it hurt my fingers when I touched the strings the next day.
Yeah, I got the little boo-boos.
So you follow my point, right? My point is there's two, in my head, there's two things going on at the same time. There's judgment by me so I don't like me judging how you look. My job is to help you get to where you like to look. Okay, so I'm not going to call you fat and lazy and all those other things that happen on this show. Okay. However, it's also my job to remind you, okay, you're early in the process here. I have to come up. So once we start moving in this new direction, if I say, "I want you to floss twice a day," and you say, "I don't have any floss sticks," and I give you a bag of floss sticks, and you after about 7 or 8 days of me prodding you to floss your teeth, and you still can't do this, that's on you now, because we agreed that you were going to do it.
Right.
So those are the two. I don't think they're parallel, but so my job is to not judge you until it's time for me as your coach to, slap your rear end and tell you to get going.
Yeah, there's, and I think this is one of the kind of, I don't think it can be taught, but I think it can be learned, skills of coaching, right? Is the appropriate amount of directness that coaches have to apply. And I think back to coaches that they hurt my feelings, but it didn't hurt my feelings because they were trying to be mean. They hurt my feelings because my mind wasn't aligned with reality. It was my fault that they hurt my feelings. It was my fault when I was told that I wasn't doing something right, or that I didn't have the right expectations. And I projected that. And I think we all have to be radically honest with ourselves here. I projected my own frustration of my disconnect between the way I was seeing things and the way things really are. And they were doing me a great service. They were actually doing me a great service to bring me back to sanity, to see the way that things really are. And that takes a good, brave coach as well. So there's those two extremes, right? We often say that virtue is between the two extremes, right? The one extreme is just being rude, mean, vicious for the sake of being rude, mean, or vicious for TV ratings. Nobody thinks that is, aside from people who tune into this show, which you shouldn't. You shouldn't watch garbage like that. You're rotting your mind. I'll make that judgment. Bad. Don't watch crap like that. Yeah. The other extreme is just being so passively indifferent that you don't care. Ultimately, you'd rather just not risk offending anybody rather than really willing what is good for somebody. And I think I've been very fortunate in my life to have coaches. I have been very fortunate in my life to have coaches that cared enough to be direct in the ways that they judged would be the most effective for getting me on the right path. And even though some of these corrections initially upset me, whether it was my guitar coach, my Taekwondo coach, fitness coaches, I was able to get over that initial upset and realize, actually, I think they might be right. And then I would improve because of that. And that's always been a lesson I've tried and again, tried, not always succeeded, but tried to apply as a coach myself, is to find that virtuous middle ground of being truthful and direct, but trying to judge prudentially what the best way to deliver that advice is. And that's a very hard thing to do. It is.
Patrick, I've heard you say a lot of smart things in my life. That is by far the most brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you.
That is something, if you don't take out a piece of paper right now and write that down and make that into either a book, blog, or whatever you kids do nowadays, I would like you to re-listen to what you just said and make sure you put that down. And I would strongly recommend that you go into some, I wouldn't say more depth because you already got the depth there, but maybe a few stories, a few clarity. This might make one of the best articles, or I would even say this might be a foundation of a book. Virtuous coaching, coaching is a virtue. I think this is money. Sorry, gentle listeners. I know sometimes we go off on these, but what you just heard is one of the hardest things to put your arms around as an effectual, caring coach. Mm-hmm. Just not the exact mean, but playing within those extremes is one of the hardest things you can do as a coach.
Right.
When I get frustrated as a coach, almost universally, and it's because everything that's going on at the moment is contrary to what we all agreed on is what we wanted to do. And that's very good, Patrick. That's very
Thank you. Well, if Dan John gives me assignment, I will see to it that it gets completed. Yeah. So we'll see if it starts. It'll start with an article and we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah. Coaching, maybe one day you'll coach, or I'll come out and coach them well, but your own children, it's a joke. But coaching my own kids and trying to be a coach and a parent and a head coach and a faculty member. And so as a faculty member, I couldn't drop F-bombs. And as a dad, I couldn't stop loving him. I had to support him. But as a coach, I had to have, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They had to be, and God bless them because they were my kids. They always had to be above the standard of everybody else.
Right.
That was that delicate tightroping between the extremes. Mm-hmm. And if you want, I can share. Maybe we can. Maybe downstream we decide to make this into something bigger. And the reason I like this, Patrick, is that people sometimes take the idea of virtue and they throw it into one little. It's like moderation. Oh, I don't drink a lot. Well, that's not just what moderation is.
Right.
There's more to moderation. Temperance. I don't drink a lot. There's more to temperance than just drinking. Abstinence. Yeah, I don't have sex. There's more to abstinence than sex. It's also meat and a bunch of other things. But I think sometimes people miss the idea that we can come in at a bit of a higher ground as coaches than just win-loss at the end of the year.
Right. I'll link Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics if people want to get a start on the virtues. But that's good, Dan. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate the encouragement.
I taught him. I used the whiteboard and I've shown him. I never taught. We were just friends.
Yeah, just buddies, just drinking pals. Good stuff. Yeah. Shall we take a few questions here, Dan?
Absolutely.
Okay, this one comes from Patrick. Look at that. Fine, fantastic name. Yes. And Patrick says, I am a physical therapist and a veteran, and I believe general fitness and conditioning are a vital part of a person's health.
Hold on. He's a veteran who believes in general fitness?
That's what he's saying.
General fitness.
General fitness.
Thanks for getting the joke. Okay.
That's rich. That one's free, folks. You'll have to sign up for the premium podcast if you want more. Patrick continues, if there were a physical fitness test for adults, think presidential fitness tests or military presidential fitness tests, what standards do you think the average person, no injuries or disabilities, should be able to accomplish? For sake of argument, let's say a 30 to 40-year-old. 1 mile or 5K times, lifting standards, etc. ? So we've gotten this question a number of times, Dan. It's actually one of my favorite questions. I always love questions about different standards, because I think it's kind of an evolving conversation with us. But yeah, what would you say? What would you say to gentle listener Patrick here?
Well, I would drop out the running ones because and Patrick, the more you play in the game, you'll know that that's out. But so I got this little thing called the get back up test, where I say on your belly, get back up, on your left side, get back up, on your right side, get back up, push up position plank, get back up, get on your back, get back up. And then I have your left hand stuck to your left knee, do the 5 again, free it up, right hand stuck to the right knee, free it up, those 5. And then right hand on left knee, and then left hand on right knee. If you just type in Dan John, get back up, you'll see it on a YouTube video, and I write about it. But the basic 25, I would have, so that would be one of my standards, Patrick, because the importance of getting up and down off the ground. And the test would be this, doing it without, the person should be able to finish all 25. And that's the standard, is finishing. I would like to think that people should be able to walk 3 miles in 1 hour, unloaded. That comes to a 10-minute, that comes to a 20-minute mile, which is not bad. I can do that loaded. I can do that rucked and loaded. But for me, that 3 mile an hour pace is what would make you live if bad poopy came down and you had to just get out. Okay. Are you okay with these so far, Patrick?
These are good. Keep going.
So the completion, a 3 mile walk in 1 hour. I think you should be able to hang for 30 seconds from a bar. Okay. Stand on 1 foot for 10 seconds. And to make it simpler, Patrick, both feet. Okay, 10 foot left, 10 foot right. You should be able to get into the bottom of a squat and get back up. And I think you should be able to walk with your body weight. And I always say for X number of steps, because I don't know what that is. But you should be able to pick up a trap bar. Yeah, there you go. Let's just stay with Patrick, a trap bar with your body weight, and take several steps forward. There, those are the general. Now, to me, those are the standards that will keep you alive. So standing on 1 foot is for 10 seconds, simplest test of balance you can possibly do. Folks, if you can't, please get on your doctor's schedule and go in and get that checked out. The hanging from the bar, that gives us all kinds of insights about shoulder mobility, grip strength, and if poopy comes down, it gives me a little bit more time to come save you.
Yeah.
The deep squat, sit for 30 seconds and stand back up. That's a basic full body mobility, flexibility test without having to go through a 4-day workshop. Picking up your body weight and walking a few steps, general body strength, and the ability to move loaded. And of course, the get back up test. Remember, Patrick and I have both fallen in the last 2 weeks. Folks, as we say about somebody else I know, if it happened to him, it's going to happen to you. Okay? So those, and the walk is just a general assessment for your, I'm not even saying cardio, for your systems. And by the way, for your ability to handle boredom. If you go to a track and walk 12 laps, you're a better man than I come to do. I would just find a loop somewhere and do it.
So Dan, I know you often walk, and I think that's a great idea. Walk with a friend, walk with family, groups, friends, whatever community. That's cool. When you walk by yourself, what do you do? Do you hum? Do you whistle? Do you listen to audiobooks?
When I walk by myself, I have my dog, which means I'm constantly engaged with him sniffing everything in Murray. So when I take Sirius for a walk, Sirius Black, it's just me and the dog. If I'm with Tiffany, it's weird because we just flow into these fascinating conversations. That's why I think it's so important to take your kids for a walk, because they might start talking about something that really is interesting to them.
Oh yeah.
And then walk by myself. Yesterday, I did a half hour in the afternoon, a Concept 2 row, and I watched my Great Courses class. So, Yeah, I guess, if I was to walk by myself, generally now I'm always walking with my groups. So
Hmm.
I haven't walked by myself. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. I think that
Um,
that's if you can walk with friends, family, that's
yeah,
all the better, all the more
Friday,
important.
Friday, Tiff and I walked 6 miles.
Mhm.
And mostly it was me complaining. No. So yeah, So I guess, I know a lot of people do podcasts. My only concern about putting on a podcast when you walk, and it's a small one, is it really does cut into your situational
Mhm.
awareness.
Mhm.
Um, Not just for cars, but for murderers and rapists. Uh, I mean, I get it, but if you're like where I live, you're here in Murray, you're gonna be absolutely fine. But if you're walking around certain cities and certain areas, I would keep your
Right.
spider senses going.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's one of those funny things. I do a lot of podcasts, especially with you, Dan. I listen to very few because I have no commute and I almost never walk alone. So
Yeah,
I wish I could listen to more podcasts. I just don't really have the opportunity
yeah,
to.
yeah.
Cool.
Patrick,
All right.
I hope
Yeah.
that was helpful.
Yeah,
And,
that's very good.
and then from there, Patrick, just Google Dan John Sleepless in Seattle. Now he's got some other ones in there you can think about.
Yeah, the classic.
Personally, I think every male should be as strong as a high school sophomore football player. That's my own theory.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. Good stuff. Okay, Patrick, thank you for the question. And
Yeah.
we hope to hear from you again soon. Next one comes from gentle listener Nigel. Nigel says, I'm keen to learn about tumbling, having heard Dan talk about it. What resources would Dan recommend? I've really enjoyed the workshops Dan has been doing and wondered if tumbling would be an interesting subject for one. So,
Wow. That would be an interesting subject to do. The filming would be difficult. I'll put a GoPro on my forehead.
here's Dan John falling down.
Nigel, the best resource I ever had, and I don't even know how you'd find it. I gave it to my assistant, Casey Sutera, when I moved. It was the 1936 book called Tumbling by these two USC professors. Back in the 30s, it's interesting though. Back in the day, if I'll pull this out real quick for those of you listening. So this is my father's book report book. It's called Book Notes, and it's a textbook, and it's really fascinating. It's by Catherine Collins, I'm sure, because the book was written in 1913. Forward to the teacher, and then one page on how to use the book, and the rest the student had to write book reports. Okay. Well, back in the day, college professors used to write textbooks, and USC came out with a number of these. Still, in my opinion, obviously the information, the science, there's no science, it's dated, but I want to say it was Dean Cromwell's, his USC track and field how-to book, and then he made flip books out of it, and I've got it all down in my basement, so far ahead of the time. But the tumbling book, I found this in a bookstore in North Carolina, and I got it for like $1, and it was just amazing. It took you from somersaults to shoulder rolls to cartwheels to what we used to call, they're called round offs. I call them cartwheels for distance because that's how I got football players to do them right. Oh, and then group tumbling exercises where you build pyramids and things like that. And I would show the assistant coaches what was normal PE classes in the 1930s. And their response was this: we couldn't do any of that. What do you mean we? We couldn't? No, our students couldn't. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Here we are almost a century later, and now we can't even consider having our students stand on each other's shoulders, and then the higher kid holds the hands of the other kid, and they make a pyramid of 8 athletes. We can't even consider doing that. Oh, and by the way, what happened next is the bottom people stepped back and they tumbled away from it. They tumbled backwards, and the guys on top tumbled forwards. And so the best thing I can tell you, Nigel, is there is a more modern book. Guy's name is Frank Shamrock. It's called Enter the Lion's Den. And he has a section on, he has 2 sections in the book. One is on, I think it might even be called tumbling. And the other one is where he uses sticks and leapfrog to do some drills. I found that those 2 chapters by themselves, good enough to have bought the book probably 3 times. And I loan it out. I never find it again.
Yeah.
It may or may not be here. But Nigel, it is a lost skill. I tell you one thing, when you first learn to tumble, make sure you have a bucket nearby, because your vestibular system goes haywire. And I'll never forget Adrian Craddock, my good friend from Ireland. Hello, Adrian. He listens every week. He'll tell you, first time he did a couple of tumbling runs with my football team, the first thing he did was ended up in the bucket. And as a life skill, for fall breaking as an adult, and I'm working with, I don't know if I could tell you the football program, but one of the football programs I'm working with, they finally agree by doing it that tumbling is probably the best football conditioner you've ever done. It feels like the game.
Yeah. So the only thing I'll add to that, I think that's all wonderful advice, is if you've got a local Taekwondo studio, go down there. Because one of the first things you'll be taught in Taekwondo is break falling and tumbling. And that'd just be a great way to get some hands-on instruction. Just go sign up for a few lessons, learn it there.
Or just hire one of the coaches to coach you. I've been saying that for years. People say, Dan, I want to learn the discus. There's no one around that knows it. And I go, is there a high school within 1,000 miles of you? Oh yeah, there's one right down the street. Call the high school, pay the head coach, and they will go, you're giving me money to coach you? Yeah, I'll coach you. Jeez. Mm-hmm. And then when you give them more than $20, they will have a heart attack, and you'll have to
right. Yeah. Good stuff. Got time for one more, Dan?
Oh, sure, as long as you like, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. This will continue on our theme with falling. I guess falling is the theme today. This one comes from gentle listener Kath Ann. And Kath Ann says, Kath Ann. Gentle listener Kath Ann. And she says, so I had a blonde moment at work and fell into a pothole 3 weeks ago Wednesday. I have a grade 2 sprain on my left ankle and pretty banged up knees, shins, wrists, hip, and left shoulder. X-rays showed nothing broken, thankfully. I am mostly full weight bearing on my foot now, and I want to restart a swing challenge, but weight bearing with the added kettlebell hurts. I was told 6 weeks for healing and as long as 6 months. Suggestions?
Well, there's many other variations of the hinge besides the swing. Can you do hip thrusts on the floor, especially after your recent adventures down? I would say that might be an idea. There's the Bulgarian goat bag swing. If you go to my YouTube channel, I have a whole section called the Hinge Family, and you can just maybe look and try a few of those. I would not suggest like we had a question not long ago from a person dealing with COVID, I think, or maybe that was my other podcast. And
I remember that one.
And I want to get back in. I want to get back in the game. It's like, first, recover from COVID. Recover. Get your sleep. Get your food. Get your lungs healthy again. Breathe fresh air. Move around. And Kat Ann, I would say the same with you. Is it going to take you 6 months to heal fully? That's a long time, but I've had injuries that I thought I would be. There is a bit of an injury curve. I don't know how many injuries you've had in your life, but it's by the way, it's the same curve that you have in love and performance. So it's kind of like, you get better and better and better every day. It gets more wonderful and beautiful. And then it hits this plateau. So with my total hip replacements, every single day I'd walk another, so much farther and feel so much better. God bless my wife for making me walk around the block every couple hours. Mm-hmm. And then it hits this plateau where you feel like this is it. This is the new normal. I'm going to be, and then if you hang on to the plateau long enough, it accelerates. The mistake people make, and this comes from the work of George Leonard, is that they try to force themselves out of the plateau and then they slowly destroy themselves. You got to, one piece of advice, Kat Ann, is I want you to embrace the plateau. Is Pat's great phrase, the plateau is the new PR. But what's nice is try not to force yourself to get better. Once you find that I feel better, but I'm just not there yet. And if you go through a couple of days, I feel better, I'm just not there yet. Just keep Just keep going to bed, waking up, go to bed, wake up, and let the process happen. Don't try to force yourself back to 100%. Mm-hmm. And it'll be weird because if you do that, you'll find you'll nudge yourself back upwards. If you can find the article in Esquire magazine by George Leonard, the most reprinted article in the history of Esquire. I know it's online for free in a bunch of places. I used to buy copies of it for all my students. I taught this class for seniors, and it was one of our readings because I thought it was such a profound thing about life. It's funny how athletic performance, love, life, finance, almost everything in life follows the same set of rules. There's that early, wonderful rise, and then that dreaded plateau. But the great ones learn to hug the plateau. So do what you can, but don't force yourself into swings if they hurt, okay? Especially if you're looking at knee ouchies. I don't know what it is about the knee, but a banged up knee seems to hurt the swing more than anything. Like I have a friend who has a total hip, probably total knee replacements, and just couldn't wait to get back swinging. It's like, dude, wait on that. Because I think this is just my own idea, but for whatever reason, the physics of the knee on the ballistic swing, that it goes like this, it just keeps going like this with all that pressure pulling it back. I'm just not sure it's good for the knee if the knee is fine, but if the knee is not fine, I think it just puts a lot of stress and shearing stress on it.
Right. Yeah. Good advice. I hope that is helpful to you, Kath Ann, and please do follow up. Wishing you a speedy and full recovery. Injuries have been the theme of this episode. In fact, it's just, it's funny because it's the one thing that's hardest to deal with because again, we're not medical professionals. We're not even trying to pretend to be most of the time anyways. But if any of these insights or experience are helpful, then we are happy to share it.
Yeah.
And
you'll notice whenever I give advice about injuries, almost universally, Patrick, you'll notice that I'm like, getting back to our biggest loser conversation, I just avoid the extremes. You don't need bed rest after you fall, but you don't need to climb, Mount Kilimanjaro. Right. Somewhere in the middle is okay.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, before we go, what do you have on the horizon this week in the old production schedule? Anything new at Dan John University? Leave us with any and all resources that you've got. Oh, and give us the update on the upcoming book as well, if there's any.
Well, for one thing, I'm supposed to be on a plane right now to England, so that isn't happening. But on the university, I've done another workshop called Everybody Else. That just went up. And I'm doing a new series. I found this old booklet. I mean, I was there, but of these little things I wrote in my little, I call it my little red book. And every time I found a quote I wanted to keep for the rest of my life, I would hand write it. And it's weird to think that I started doing this in 1973. And it's just, there's quotes from Arnold's book, Dick Nottmeyer quotes, Ralph Maughan books. One day at a track meet in 87, I visited Coach Maughan after the track meet at his house. He invited me over, and he gave me this list of 10 things to think about the discus. And I'm like, this is gold. It was 8 years after I graduated from college, and I just keep them in this little red book. And so I'm just sharing why I would keep it and then how that impacted my thinking. Well, 1973, I wrote this down in 1973, this thing on Kolev, the Bulgarian lifter, and it impacted my thinking the rest of my career. It's just kind of an interesting little thing.
Yeah.
And then the book Attempts, last night, Lindsay finished about the author. The index is finished. So it's called Attempts, Essays in Health, Fitness, Longevity, and Easy Strength. And they're all, the Easy Strength articles start to get a little longer because I started talking about, 2-month programs and stuff like that. But most of the essays are about, I don't know what'll come out on the printed page, but on the typed page, a page and a half, 2 pages, a simple, quick read. There's some things about my issues with goal setting. Folks, I'm not against goal setting, but to me, what you want to do is a pirate map. You want get a good night's sleep, be grateful, do your little 1-minute meditation, go to the gym 3 days. It's, if you can eat 8 different vegetables a day, you put together that pirate map for 365 days, that process is much better than the process of doing that is much more important than the result of getting the goal. Because you're going to get the goal because it's all about the process, folks. And I'm very happy with the book. It looks good. It's a simple book.
Is it up for pre-order yet? That's the big question. Can people pre-order this thing yet?
I'll ask Larry, and by next Tuesday, I'll make sure we have something. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay. Yeah. And again, if for the listeners, one of the things I'm not real good about is pushing my own work. And so a lot of the stuff, like don't buy 5 copies and get me on you're not going to be on my inner circle. You are, gentle listener, you listening right now, you are in my inner circle. There's nothing behind the green curtain back there. There are no secrets.
Yes. Well,
I wish there were. Oh,
but I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic book, like all of them. I actually love essay style books. I know they're one of my favorite types of books to read. You can kind of take them like a buffet, or you can go start to finish. So I'm really looking forward to this one, Dan.
Well, I think why Never Let Go was so popular is because it was a buffet. Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to do now is write books that are systematic, but can be read buffet style.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And I want you to go. And again, my audience is pushing me in a direction as a writer, and that's okay. I mean, that's sometimes that's really good, and sometimes in the case of like Dune and some other books, the books by Orson Scott Card, the Ender Game series. Yeah, you should just stop at number 1 there, buddy. Dune should have stopped at number 1. Yeah. So sometimes, yeah. Okay, I'm different. And how about you? Anything fancy coming up? Anything good?
Nothing fancy. Just living, Dan. Just living, trying day by day by day. You know how it is, right?
The great poem of Noah. The days are long, Lord. The days are long.
The days are long. They certainly are. But Dan, as always, real quick before we go, just a couple of reminders. We do have giveaways and goodies for those of you who support the podcast. All we ask is that you consider sharing these episodes, leaving a positive, overly gushy, gooey, overly fawning, brown-nosing 5-star review on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you're listening. Screenshot that. Email it to me at patflynn@chroniclesofstrength.com with the subject line podcast. We will send you 3 cool goodies if you don't already have them. We've got the post-deployment plan that Dan made probably almost a year ago now. That's been very popular. The Wake Up Fat Pirate Map. What would Dan John do if you suddenly woke up fat? Very simplified steps. Kind of ties into what we talked about, The Biggest Loser. So that's kind of cool. We'll give you that. And what's the last one that I'm forgetting about? There was another one in there.
And who can forget the third one? And tell you what, Pat,
there's another one. I forget what it was, but there's another one. Yeah.
Let's make a goal for next week to come up with for me to write a new thing.
Perfect. Yeah. All the more goodies.
Next week, our challenge. And gentle listeners, if you have something you'd like, send it to Pat, because Pat will read it. I will. The problem with me is I will read it and then give you the answer. Pat will read it and keep it for everybody else.
That is right. And we appreciate
come up with an idea. If you come up with an idea of something you want, and I'll put it together for you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So you can hit me up at patflynn@chroniclesofstrength.com. Just put podcast in the subject line so I see it. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the share button. Like we said, Dan is super gracious just to give us his time. I'm not bribing him. I'm really not. He's just a cool dude to come do this. So want to make sure that we share the appreciation, help get this out. So you sharing, leaving reviews is seriously helpful. And we got cool stuff for those of you that help us there. So Dan, thank you so much. And we will talk to you next week.
Miss you already, buddy.
See you then.